Anti-derivative Jill.
Hello and welcome to A Year's Journey Through Middle-earth, Book 1, Chapter 1. And this first chapter is called The Long Expected Party, which of course is a play on the first chapter of The Hobbit called The Unexpected Party. I'm Anti-Derivative Jill, and joining me on this epic journey is Tygerstripes.
Hello.
Yes, hello.
Hey.
I thought about going alone, but as Frodo was advised against I found a friend to come along with me.
Yes, that makes me Sam, I believe.
Yes, it does. It does make you Sam. I usually start these type of adventures with how I got into the Lord of the Rings. It came to me, lots of things come to me late in life in terms of pop culture, and this was one of those things. I have a friend who lives in the hill country where we would go visit him, and he would have us watch the Lord of the Rings, and that was how I was introduced to it. We watched it several times, and he lives on land in the country in a house that he built for himself.
Oh,
So
he's quite the hobbit. That's impressive.
yes, he is. He also sees himself as Sam. So what about you, Tiger Stripes?
I must have read The Hobbit before I read Lord of the Rings. I started reading The Rings, I believe, in 8th grade. Well, no, because I know in 7th grade I did a book report, I believe it was 7th grade, where for the cover I drew the Durin's Door, the door into the mines of Moria. I reproduced the drawing inside the book. So I must have started in 7th grade, and that means I must have read The Hobbit, when I was in elementary, which I'm kind of surprised by that. I remember I hung out with three kind of nerdy but clearly really intelligent boys in 8th grade. And why was I hanging out with them? Were we all in the same class together? I can't remember. And one of them saw that I had fellowship with me and, sort of teased me about it. And I remember being both charmed and annoyed by that at the same time. And I, too, immediately started this compare the title of the chapter 1, A Long Expected Party, with the Hobbit's chapter title, An Unexpected Party. So that's just lovely the way Tolkien knew that he had fans who were there for the ride, and he was sort of writing to them right from the get-go.
He was. He definitely called back to the past, and even though I started off with the movies, I did go back and read the first two books. I have actually never read Return of the King. And so this
Wow,
year
well,
will
this
be
will
my
be,
first read through.
that's swell. That's great. That'll be something for you then, something for all of us. So
You
I
know,
guess I should try not to spoil, because I was going to just spoil right out of the gate.
I've seen the movie, so if it was in the movie, it won't be a spoiler.
The first, right from the note on the text, Douglas Anderson of Houghton Mifflin Publishing wrote, "The Lord of the Rings is often erroneously called a trilogy, when in fact it is a single novel, consisting of 6 books plus appendices, sometimes published in 3 volumes." And I'm like, that kind of took me aback. I'm like, oh, okay, that is what, because I do have a single volume copy of it where all 3 are in the same book. It's a mighty tome. The first volume, The Fellowship of the Ring, was published in Great Britain by the London firm George Allen and Unwin on the 29th of July, 1954. An American edition followed on October 21st of the same year, published by Houghton Mifflin Company of Boston. Again, from the notes on the text, in the production of this first volume, Tolkien experienced what became for him a continual problem: printer's errors and compositor's mistakes, including well-intentioned corrections of his sometimes idiosyncratic usage. These corrections include the altering of dwarves to dwarfs, elvish to elfish, further to farther, nasturtians to nasturtiums, try and say to try to say, and, quote, worst of all, unquote, to Tolkien, elven to elfin. And yeah, I can see how that would drive him berserk as a writer.
And it is known that you should have an editor who is not yourself, but there are some corrections that are not necessary.
Yes.
I suppose that would have been annoying. You also said you had some other things to share.
I do. This is the cover, the 3 covers of the first of the 3 books. This was the paperback edition, and I only just learned today, like literally within the last hour, that the artist is named Barbara Remington. Like, most people, I believe I assumed that she was a man. So shame on me.
Well, I didn't even know her name at all, so you were still further ahead than I.
Well, again, I just learned this within the last hour. I went looking so I'm like, who is that artist? I need to know who that is. And it turns out it's Barbara Remington. I have a little piece of information. She, of course, was really known for her cover art here and for the first paperback edition of The Hobbit as well. She said in an interview about her association with Tolkien's works, Remington mentions that she had not been able to get hold of the books before making the illustration and had only a sketchy idea from friends what they were about. Tolkien, the author, could not understand why her illustration included what he thought were pumpkins in a tree or why a lion appeared at all. The lions were removed from the cover of later editions. Apparently that's just The Hobbit. Remington became a huge Tolkien fan and would have definitely drawn different pictures, unquote, had she read the books first. So, and I think this is the edition that I read myself first.
Wonderful. I love that the 3 covers come together as one.
They are
giant.
one picture that's just been divided into 3.
I also like that you have one volume version of it, because I do see The Lord of the Rings as being one story.
There was a map that was based on her drawing. And this is not the map that I had over my bed as a teen, but I did see this one occasionally in other people's houses, and it is pretty fantastic.
Yeah,
as well.
I think it's incredible that these aren't just stories. He's mapped everything out and knows exactly what everything looks like.
It's just amazing. I also have some copies of his drawings. The one that was over my bed as a teen was by Pauline Baines. This is the one that, I would just sort of spend a lot of time dreaming on and looking at, with the 9 walkers and the 9 riders and a couple of other characters thrown in, the bad guys, as well as,
nice. I like this one more, actually. I'm glad
this one is prettier, and I love Pauline Baines' illustration. And it's kind of nice, too, that you don't really see their faces. Their faces are sort of left to your imagination. This is my heart song. And it still is, even though I'm not a teenager anymore.
It's beautiful.
Well, it's got the inset illustrations, too. So
yeah, I think that's what it is. It inspires your imagination.
There was information about, Tolkien just really didn't... He was appreciative that people were mapping, but he didn't really like a lot of the illustrations that other people did, even Baines. She did the cover of the first single volume edition, and illustrations in that as well. I had never seen this before. This was new to me, and it's not swell. I'm so used to seeing that Uncial font for Lord of the Rings that this just looks kind of clunky over her very elegant illustration.
So you have a problem with... I can understand having a problem with the font. It's not as...
iconic. I'm so used to that other font now. But I had never seen this before. But I love the branches making the Gothic arch at the top. Anything with the Gothic arch is good by me.
Yeah, and of course, nowadays, if you buy the books, it's going to have movie images all over them.
Yeah, which is a pity. Well, I got at some point, I received probably as a gift a box set of paperbacks, and they had completely different covers that I'm pretty sure were Tolkien illustrations of the different stars in the mythology of the elves, which is kind of an interesting concept because they don't really figure that much in the books except in passing.
Well, then I guess we're ready to start talking about the chapters. Yeah. Chapter 1.
Yes.
Of course, as we said, was a long-expected party.
Yes.
And, of course, it's all about Bilbo's 11th birthday. 11 is 110, so his 11st is 111.
Correct.
So, and this party is so extravagant that he ends up buying up an extraordinary amount of food and party favors and everything because he's inviting everyone. He's trying to give away lots of things to make it easier to give the ring away. And he's wealthy for a hobbit, due to his adventures with the dwarves when he was younger. And this book is really great at calling back to that when he took it from Gollum, which is what this party in this whole chapter is really about. Even though he's wealthy, his reputation isn't quite as rich because not everybody believes that he encountered dragons, but some of them believe he has lots of jewels and gold hidden in tunnels in his hobbit hole. So they pick and choose which parts of the tale they want to believe. But one thing that's strange that nobody can ignore is that he hasn't seemed to age, which is a very strange thing. He's looked 50 years old for 61 years.
Wish I could say the same.
Yeah, me too. They say it will have to be paid for. It isn't natural, and trouble will come of it. And so it's very clear that the lack of aging, is due to his ownership of the ring. However, many of the hobbits forgive him for his oddities because he's so generous. And so to say that the key to a hobbit's heart is through his stomach is a bit of an understatement.
And presents.
And presents. Yes, they love to give each other presents, especially on their own birthdays. When Bilbo turned 99 years old, he adopted his orphaned cousin, Frodo, to be his heir and live with him at Bag End. Frodo also shares Bilbo's birthday on September the 22nd, which is also the first day of fall. So while Bilbo is turning 11, Frodo is turning 33, which is a hobbit's coming of age, where they're finally considered adults and out of their irresponsible tweens of their 20s. And so when I turned 33, that's when I finally considered myself an adult. I used that number to my advantage. And everyone's talking about the party, and the most respected authority on the matter is Ham Gamgee, who's also, of course, Sam's dad. But they call him the Gaffer. I finally learned why he's called that. It's because a gaffer is British slang for an old man. And he's friends with Bilbo because he and now his son Sam work for him in his garden. But that doesn't stop the Gaffer from gossiping about him and Frodo. Family trees and connections are extremely important to hobbits, and they love getting into the details. Frodo lost his parents to a boating accident is one of the things they're talking about. His dad was Drogo Baggins and his mom Primula Brandybuck. And those are hobbits who live near the Brandywine River. And the Hobbiton hobbits think the river hobbits are queer, but then later on we're going to see that the river hobbits think the same.
Kind of like small towns.
Yes.
Always throwing stones at each other. Tolkien himself was orphaned fairly young. When he was 3, he was born in South Africa. His family had gone there to forward his father's career as a banker. When he was 3, he went to England with his mother and brother on what was intended to be a lengthy family visit. His father, however, died in South Africa of rheumatic fever before he could join them. At that point, that's really hard on his mother because women didn't really have any way to support themselves, and so they sort of traveled and stayed with her parents in different relations, and he saw a lot of small-town England and all of the mills and the bogs and the hills. And at one point, he would stay at his Aunt Jane's farm, which was called Bag End. That's where he got that from.
That's lovely. That's good information. I love that.
Yeah, and his mother died not long after. She had diabetes, and back then that was a death sentence.
That's terrible.
Well, yeah. He and his brother were orphaned pretty early and raised by a Catholic priest who, was looking after them, kind of paying for their education and seeing after them and that kind of thing. But up to the point where his mother passed, she took very good care of him. She homeschooled them, and particularly because he was just so much more advanced than the other children at school. She saw that and saw to it that she kept him at home and taught him all of these languages and gosh only knows what else.
Wow, that's a fantastic mother.
Yeah. I really thought it was interesting to compare the first 2 sentences in The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. To compare the first 2 sentences of The Hobbit and then Lord of the Rings. And the first sentence in The Hobbit is, "In a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit." And boom, boom. You kind of realize this is very basic. It's going to be a breeze to read. And in Lord of the Rings, the very first sentence is, when Mr. Bilbo Baggins of Bag End announced that he would shortly be celebrating his 11th birthday with a party of special magnificence, there was much talk and excitement in Hobbiton. That sentence is the entire first paragraph of The Rings, and it's a clap back to The Hobbit and an acknowledgement to the new readers that here we go, this is different. It's starting off the same, but it's going to be different. You're going to have to keep up.
Definitely. The Saxville Bagginses thought they were going to get Baggins, according to the gaffer, because they were supposed to be the heir, and then he has an heir.
That's a good way to go, too. Yes.
We also learned that Bilbo taught Sam Gamgee how to read and told him lots of stories. And of course, we all know Sam's favorite stories are about the elves. Preparations for the party ramp up in September when Gandalf arrives with fireworks, making all the little Hobbit children very excited. We got a quote here. They suffer very little crime, and life seems lavish, easy, and good. The Shire folk are sheltered. They're sheltered, so they don't know about Gandalf's real business, what he's actually doing. He's just a party favor to them. He's just part of the celebrations. So they're not even sure just how powerful he is. Gandalf does arrive with those fireworks, and he confirms with Bilbo that Bilbo is intending to go through with his plan. Of course, his plan is to leave Hobbiton. And so it's finally party time, and hobbits love to give others gifts on their own birthdays. And when we do it as humans, we call them party favors. And this party's full of them. Even the kids get toys that are magical and crackers full of musical instruments with which they played songs and danced and played games. And the food is amazing, of course, as Bilbo bought up most of everything. And the fireworks are spectacular. And most impressive was the lifelike red golden dragon that said it's time for that signals that it's time for dinner.
Let me see if I have a photo of that, I think. It's not a photo exactly. You do? Yeah, it's a, visit Hobbiton. It's pretty.
Yes, it said that it was lifelike, but not life-sized. But it does mean, it did mean at the party that it was time for Bilbo's speech. Time for first the hobbits get to eat. And then after they're good and full, and then they're tolerant enough to listen to the speech.
Yes, and the whole party takes place under a massive tree. And the tent is so big that I believe the tree is even inside the tent.
Wow.
Bilbo's invited, just for his speech, a special group of one gross of hobbits. And they're all very offended by this, because you don't refer to hobbits by the gross. A gross is just a number 144 that you refer to things or produce, but not hobbits.
Right. They felt like, oh, are we just here just to fulfill your clever number?
To fill out that number.
He names some of the family that he's invited, of course. He's invited the Grubs, the Chubbs, the Burrowses, the Hornblowers, the Bulgers, Brace Girdles. Wait, what?
The Brace Girdles, yes.
The Brace Girdles, Good Bodies. Sometimes I feel like, are these fake? Brockhouses and Proudfoots.
Proud Feet. Yeah, no, this is I love the list in the chapter, all of them, but this one, he punches 3 times, and that's the rule of comedy, is 3, and I like that he did that 3 times. He gives that list.
And then, of course, there's that famous line that, I don't know half of you half as well as I should like, and I like less than half of you half as well as you deserve. Some of them are working that to see if it's complimentary, but it's not.
It depends on which side of that equation you're on.
It's true. Finally, he carries through with what he calls his joke. This is the end. I am going. I am leaving now. Goodbye. And Bilbo disappears with the ring, but Gandalf adds a flash of light so that everyone's thrown off as to how Bilbo disappeared. They don't see him putting the ring on. And this is really upsetting to everyone, and they need, more drinks.
And more food.
Yes, more food. Yeah. Yeah, I think one of them says something like he's gone, but he didn't take the victuals. And so he's ready to go off to his holiday. He's going to Rivendell, and because he's got friendship with the elves there. Gandalf shows up to see Bilbo off and make sure that he leaves the ring. But he meant to put it on the mantle for Frodo. He even put it in an envelope and everything, but it just keeps inching it back in his pocket. Bilbo tells Gandalf he doesn't intend to come back to the Shire. He's feeling old, all thin, sort of stretched, if you know what I mean. Like butter that has been scraped over too much bread. That can't be right. And he even calls the ring his precious, but defends himself, saying that he's not like Gollum. But he does agree that that was the point of this entire affair, this entire party. After all, this is what this party business was all about, really, to give away lots of birthday presents and somehow make it easier to give it away at the same time. But so Gandalf ends up needing to. They do a lot of arguing and posturing before Bilbo finally agrees that it goes with Frodo. Goes to Frodo with all the rest. And so Bilbo would not. I mean, Bilbo would not have given up the ring without Gandalf. So their friendship was an important catalyst for how Bilbo achieved what most people can't do, which is to give up the ring.
No one else has ever done it before, according to Gandalf.
And that follows. That makes sense. People will not abandon the ring, but it will abandon them.
Funny how that works.
Well, and hobbits are really sturdy compared to others who have encountered the ring. He was angry for a moment, but then Bilbo cheers up almost instantly after being relieved of the ring.
Yeah,
then
I'm
he
sure
does
it's a massive weight off. Probably literally.
Yes. And then he sings his song, "The road goes ever on and on, down from the door where it began. Now far ahead the road has gone, and I must follow if I can." And there's another verse, but I won't read it all. And he sets out towards Rivendell. It foreshadows
Frodo's journey. There's so much foreshadowing in these first 6 chapters. I was kind of blown away. I don't think I'd ever really quite noticed it before. So much.
And it also kind of parallels his own previous journey, too.
And I really love all of the humor in this first chapter. The small town gossip with the gaffer. Again, all of the foreshadowing. But also the hobbits and just reviewing them and their small town worldview with their dialogue and the banter. All of that establishes a rhythm of speech and humor that's reflected all through the book in the dialogue between the 4 hobbits, or the 2 and 2 hobbits, or however many hobbits are together at once, through the whole rest of the book. And given that the surroundings that they find themselves in later on in the book is pretty grim, some terrible things happen, having that humor as a basis, as a touchstone, it's a welcome buffer to how hard the book gets later on in terms of experiences that happen to them. So I feel like that grounding is established here in this first chapter.
I think so too. The Hobbit was deliberately written as a children's story. This one, it matures that, but it still retains the lighthearted spirit of a Hobbit that Tolkien personally connects with.
I'm going to recount a short personal story here, if I may.
Sure.
Yeah.
Please do.
I worked for years at LA Building and Safety, and I was at the public, the residential counter. I didn't work the counter myself. I was clerical, but boy, was that a lot of work to do. We had a retired Inspector John who worked the public counter there, and John and I got off to a bad start the first week we met. And at some point, I think within that first week, he said very directly to me, "I don't like you." To which I just calmly replied, "Right back at you, gaffer." And I don't even know where that word came from other than Lord of the Rings. It just popped right out of my mouth. And he seemed amused by that. He just kind of sat back in his chair and crossed his arms and sort of looked at me and was trying not to smile. Over a pretty short time, we became friends. Like the gaffer, he was a home gardener, and he would often show up with his forearms scratched and scarred. Eventually, down the line, I bought him a pair of long leather gauntlet-like gloves. And shortly after that, he turned up with about 8 big buckets of blackberry plants for me, though they were not easy for me to keep, but I did not refuse them. But that's how I knew that we had become friends. But that one word, I think, just turned the course of our relationship. Gaffer for the win.
That's an incredible story.
But it's also, as well as meaning old man, it's a sign of respect. It means somebody who's intelligent and has knowledge, particularly long-standing knowledge.
Right, and that's what the gaffer was. He had knowledge of he was the biggest authority on anything to do with gardening in whatever they did grow.
And
He knew
Hobbiton,
about it.
too. Everybody in
Yeah.
Hobbiton he had an opinion on.
And he knew all the family trees.
Yes.
So Frodo arrives after Bilbo leaves and finds himself the new master at Bag End and the new ring bearer. And even though Gandalf doesn't know much about the ring, he tells him to keep it secret, to keep it safe. And his first chore is to give out all the possessions that Bilbo had labeled to give away. But as the hobbits come in and out collecting their gifts, they kind of start taking some unlabeled things too, to relieve Bag End from all of the stuff that Bilbo accumulated over his life. And hobbits collect a lot of things because there are so many birthday parties where they get presents.
And Merry is present during this. I was kind of surprised, really, in this first
Yes.
chapter. Bilbo and Gandalf are reintroduced, but the only major new characters are Frodo and Merry. And even Sam doesn't show up until the next chapter, other than to be referred to by the gaffer. But Merry shows a couple of the younger hobbits who are searching for Frodo's gold in the basement and the back quarters and that kind of thing. He shows them out.
Yes.
But he's just, I was really startled by what a mensch Merry is in these early chapters. He's just the best. He's the friend you want to have.
Yes, he's the friend who will actually go out and complete chores for you and have your back.
Yes. He'll do chores for you didn't even know you wanted done. He's just the best.
Yes. And that was really helpful because the worst of the hobbits coming to take things from Bag End were, of course, the Saxville Bagginses, with the lady of the house snooping around collecting things that don't belong to her. Yeah, because they believed that they own these things. They're not yours. You don't belong here. You're a brandy buck. And so they're trying to offend Frodo, but he's just had enough, and he doesn't offer her any tea. Then but then it's time to lock the drawers and have his own tea. So, but he does get one more visitor, and Gandalf's come back. He's only begun to research about the ring, and all he can say so far is it may have other powers than just making you vanish. So he wishes Frodo farewell and leaves the Shire for a long while. That's all for now, and we're going to continue our quest. Stay tuned.
Namari.
This is the end. I'm going now. I bid you all a very fond farewell.